You're listening to the Farm Report Podcast with Jake and Corey, brought to you by Indians Baseball Insider and broadcast on the Smoke Signals Podcast Network. We're talking Tribe.
Listen, let's play ball. Shoot me around. Let's play ball, baby. Bang down the stones. Play ball.
Well, good day, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever and whenever you happen to be tuning in, we are glad to have you aboard. I'm Jake Duncan, minor league content coordinator for Indians Baseball Insider, and this is the Farm Report Podcast. Joined as always by Mahoning Valley Scrappers beat writer for IBI, Corey Christen. Corey, have you recovered yet from the Cavs championship?
No. I'm still tired. We're recording on Thursday. The Cavs won the previous Sunday, so Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. So 4 nights I've slept probably 12 hours, 12 or 13 hours, and that's counting the relative 7 I got last night. I mean, it's just I've been running on adrenaline. I think over Sunday night when they won, because I was in the city, I went with my dad and I met some friends up there, and we watched the game on the eastern part of town in the flats by the river, and once they won, we all ran up to East 4th and the Q and all that stuff, and we partied and we had fun. And Monday I worked my internship over in Akron and made the drive. I stayed up in Cleveland Sunday night, and I slept probably 1 hour from Sunday night to Monday, and I was running on pure adrenaline and excitement, and it's starting. Call it the hangover, if you will, but I'm starting to feel it now. But I'm always down to talk some Tribe baseball and some farms. So I'm ready to go as always. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be alive. I'll put it that way. That's for sure.
Oh man, I'm telling you. I stayed at home with my dad watching Game 7, and that last minute of the game, the block by LeBron, the shot by Kyrie, and then the final buzzer sounding, and everything just going crazy. It was something to see, because my dad only a year old when the Browns won in '64, so this is pretty much a new experience for both of us, seeing a major Cleveland sports championship, and then watching the footage from the parade on Wednesday. That was just nuts too. 1.3 million people downtown, and just looking at especially the aerial footage of how many people were packed downtown, crowding the parks, crowding the streets, and it's certainly something that Cleveland has waited a long time for, and is much deserved. So, we congratulate the Cavs here at the Farm Report Podcast, and hopefully the Indians will be next up. They're playing good baseball right now, but we're here to talk about the minor leagues, though, and the Indians of the future. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The biggest news out of the farm system right now, I think, would have to be Brady Aiken making his professional debut for the Arizona League Indians. He pitched 2 innings of scoreless ball. He walked a batter, did not allow a hit or a run, struck out 3 in 2 innings of work. So, coming back from Tommy John surgery, only pitching 2 innings is to be expected after that much time off for such a young pitcher. So, last year's first-round pick, Corey, seeing him back on the mound in a professional atmosphere, what do you make of Brady Aiken's debut, and most importantly, that it went without any complications?
Brady Aiken is a funny story, because not funny, but he's kind of an elusive guy, because Houston drafted him number 1 overall, and then they tried to essentially lowball him with his contract offer, and then he had Tommy John back in 2015, and he got drafted by the Indians organization, and now to see it personified, I think is the Indians fan base can kind of cool down a little bit on the whole hype train with Brady Aiken, and now we get to see him pitch, and we get to see him and how he performs and adjusts to competition. he was on that 2-inning limit, so there's nothing to be alarmed there. And the most important thing in this whole process with Brady Aiken, in my eyes, is no setbacks. If we hear of setbacks with that arm, then that might be a cause for concern. Knock on wood, of course, but very encouraging to see him out there. But the one walk in 2 innings, it is what it is. He looked okay. From what I hear, he looked good. I wish I had film to see. Unfortunately, with the Arizona League, that's not a lot of something you get. But you go back and watch his film. You go back and watch his tape from his pre-draft tape, and he's just unbelievable with what he can throw and what he can do with his pitches. And I think that with Brady Aiken, we got to be patient with him. And we know he's talented. We know what he can do, like I said. But it's a process where we just hope for no setbacks. We hope he can develop as we project him to. And then who knows when we'll see him in Cleveland, of course. But we want encouraging signs of progression, and him getting out on the hill, especially when do you have Tommy John? March of 15, so about a year and 3 months. We'll take that. So it's just a matter of him putting consistent outings out and getting healthy, and that's the important thing.
Well, I think with the Indians, there's no reason to rush Brady Aiken, and that's why they're going so slow with him, because obviously the Indians have probably one of the better rotations in all of baseball right now. That's just starting to come into its own, and they have starting pitching depth in the upper levels of the farm system, so they are handling this just as carefully as possible with Aiken, because one, he's young, two, he's got an electric arm when he's healthy, so you want to make sure to preserve that potential by bringing him along with kid gloves. So I think that with Brady Aiken now pitching off of a mound, we can move away from the theoretical and into reality as far as what we can expect from him and how we can formulate our expectations of him moving forward. So it's an exciting time for any prospect to get into a professional setting and start measuring his potential based on his performance rather than his hype, like you said with Aiken. So definitely exciting when we're going to be watching his progress as the season goes on. My guess is he probably stays in Arizona most of the year, but just to get stretched out and to recover. But if his recovery goes just swimmingly and he's just dominating down there, I mean, maybe there is a chance he gets to time at Mahoning Valley towards the tail end of the season, but that's pretty much a long shot, safe to say at this point. But we want to move on, going up to Lake County, though, and their All-Star game just concluded. They're starting off their second half, and the two guys on this roster in Lake County, well, pretty much their whole outfield, although Kaya Tom has not played much lately. Nathan Lucas and Connor Maribel, the two main guys in that outfield. Now, these are two guys who probably the average Indians fan has no idea, never heard of them. And I understand that, because they're not the Bradley Zimmers or the Clint Frazier types. But you look at the numbers that they put up this year, and they have really been impressive in many facets of the game, whether it's defense, whether it's hitting, whether it's speed, whether it's power. These guys have really, Maribel especially to me, because Maribel is a guy I didn't know much about before the season. I know you got to see him a little bit in Mahoning Valley last year. So let's go ahead and start with him. Connor Maribel, while I'm pulling up his stats, Corey, why don't you tell us about what impressions you got of him?
Well, Maribel was a guy who actually saw quite a bit of playing time, and that really wasn't expected of him. Last year in Mahoning Valley, it was Anthony Santander, it was Kai Tom, and it was Salento Sales out in that outfield. And then Maribel just kind of stepped in, and I didn't really get to talk to Travis Fryman, who managed the team last year, about Maribel specifically, but obviously there's something there in his game. He played 61 games last year, which in short season is about, 90% of the season. Um, and that went right behind the three leaders on that team in games played: Mark Matthias, Willie Castro, Kai Tom. Castro, we know, was a shortstop for the All-Star shortstop, rather, for Lake County. Tom is in Lake County. Matthias now in Lynchburg. So Maribel got to play quite a bit with these guys who are kind of accelerating their own development. So he got to kind of evolve with them a little bit. But the thing with Maribel, despite all the playing time, he only hit 222 in Mahoning Valley last year, 247 on base, 283 slugging. He struck out 17 Ks to 6 walks drawn. Connor Maribel, he was drafted highly. He was a sought after pick, and the Indians liked him for where they drafted him. I mean, he was a 25th rounder, which isn't, high. I consider high pick to be anywhere from 1 to 15. So he's a mid-level guy. And for a guy who was drafted in the 25th round to kind of gain, I have this feeling that he's just kind of gained a trust within the system. Now, for a guy who hit 222 back in Mahoning Valley, to do what he's doing for Lake County this year, which is hitting 313 and slugging 491 with an 872 OPS, very good. Maybe it's an off-season workout thing, and we'd have to talk to our man Tyler Stotsky on that, who's on the captain's beat, to see what he has on that. But the numbers that he's putting up in Lake County, 65 games so far this year in Lake County, he has 22 doubles. He had 5 last year, all of last year in Mahoning Valley in 61 games. So he's seen the ball. He's clearly seen the ball better, and this is in the exact same number of at bats. By the way, 230 apiece as of today. So just what he's doing in his development and progression, he's starting to see the ball better. He's starting to be more selective at the plate, and that's just those two statements are just coming from the numbers and what he's putting out this season. And I'm looking at him. He's drawn 28 walks as opposed to 6 last year in those 230 at-bats. He struck out 33 times this year, but 17 last year. So the strikeout number, but the walk number is up as well. So he's mixing in aggression, and he's starting to be a little more patient. You think he's starting to see pitches a little better. You got to like what you're seeing from him this year. Again, 25th round pick last year. He hit 222 in Mahoning Valley, and it's got to be something in the offseason that, he must have drank some good water in the offseason, because it's really been nice because, aside from the Clint Frazier's and the Bradley Zimmers, where's the real outfield depth in the system? There's kind of, hidden gems. I mentioned an Anthony Santander who's having a nice year up in Lynchburg. And now we got guys like a Nathan Lucas who we're going to talk about. And now Connor Maribel. It's encouraging to have guys like this, to have guys like this produce.
Well, what I look at when I look at Connor Maribel, and I was looking at some of the top performers offensively in the system, and I think Clint Frazier probably tops out the list, but Connor Maribel, just by the numbers, is pretty much right there. I mean, you mentioned the 22 doubles. He has a decent strikeout to walk ratio. He gets on base, 380 on base percentage, 872 OPS. So yeah, something is clicking for him this year in Lake County, and I'm wondering if and when the time comes where a guy like Greg Allen gets moved up to Akron, or whatever the case may be in Lynchburg, if a spot opens up, is Maribel going to be a guy to move up, or is a guy like Lucas going to be a guy who can move up? And speaking of Lucas, let's go ahead and talk about him right now. Now, the thing that jumps out to me when I look at Lucas is he has such a great ability to get on base. I mean, he's had an on-base percentage over 400 pretty much the entire season. So to be able to see him doing this, continue to do this in Lake County this year, and he was another guy who was in Mahoning Valley last year, only played in 5 games, but he's batting over 300 this year, OBP of 401. He has 17 doubles, 2 home runs, 5 triples. He's drawn 32 walks, struck out 45 times. But it seems like on base percentage and speed. I mean, he has 14 stolen bases. That he's pretty much a prototypical leadoff guy, and I know he's spent a lot of time in the leadoff spot for the Captains this year. Corey, what are your thoughts on Lucas?
Well, Lucas was the 7th-round pick last year who saw injury concerns. He wasn't a risky pick by any means. He's a guy who he didn't strike out much, and he puts the ball in play, and it's showing this year. He's getting the ball in the gaps. He has a little power, don't get me wrong, but he could play anywhere in the outfield. You mentioned the ability to potentially hit leadoff. This is a guy who's, he was drafted as a right fielder, but he just seems to scream center fielder. He seems to scream, we talked about the potential leadoff hitter, a guy who can make plays defensively. Our own Jeff Ellis, when Lucas was drafted last year, our own Jeff Ellis, our buddy, we talked to him last week or 2 weeks ago. He wrote the piece when Lucas was drafted. He said, quote, "He went from a walk-on at Sacramento State to one of the better hitters in the history of the university. He even had some pop this year. It appears to be more doubles pop. He has some speed and above-average arm." End quote. So, missing time in Mahoning Valley last year, and he was going to be a day one starting outfielder. Now, whether it was right field or center field, we don't know. But he was a day one starter in Mahoning Valley, and that could have further progressed him. So it makes sense to have him down in Lake County for the full season to see what he can do. And certainly, again, you mentioned the numbers. He's right up there with those leaders. And those 5 triples, that's impressive. It shows the speed, and it shows the gap power, and it shows the ability. He's a left-handed bat, so it shows the ability. He has the pull ability. And, you got to be encouraged. Again, it's like Brady Aiken. You get him out there, and he's healthy, and he's playing. We know the talent he has, but until he puts out consistent outings and he's healthy and he's not showing any signs of regression, that's when we can start really projecting him and really start to see who he is as a player and what he can become.
When Indians fans ask what prospects are looming in the outfield behind the Bradley Zimmers and Clint Fraziers, those guys are probably going to be staples in the Tribe outfield. Knock on wood for years to come. But if there comes a time when there's a spot opening up in Cleveland, who's going to be next in line? We mentioned the Greg Allen and the Anthony Santander in Lynchburg. I think these guys are that next tier down from those guys in Lynchburg. Lucas, Maribel, Kaya Tom, and these guys are going to be ready and waiting if the time should come when the Indians need to add another outfielder from within in the next several years. Now, they're still obviously a few years down the line from being major league ready, but to see them be able to put up these numbers at low A ball and see the potential call up to the next level later in the year, that's something to keep an eye on, an interesting development. If you want to learn more about the Indians outfield depth beyond Bradley Zimmer and Clint Frazier.
Well, before we go on, I just want to I'm thinking about, different positions in the system and the depth we have. We always talk about depth and how important it is to have guys. You don't need studs all the way from Columbus all the way down into the Arizona League, but to have guys who you see glimpses and you see glimmers of what they can do, and then the ability to turn that into something that turns into full-time production. I mean, look at Michael Brantley. He was a throw-in in that Matt Laporta deal for CC Sabathia. He was a throw-in. And the Indians and their scouting department, they went for him. They saw something in him, and then they used the powers that be within the farm system to bring him up, and now look at him. So, I want to relate this. You draft Will Benson first round. He's going to start in the Arizona League. It's going to be a longitudinal process for him. It's going to be a lengthy process. He gets, again, we're recording on Thursday. He's getting his first career start tonight, and he's batting, I believe he's batting cleanup for the AZL Indians. So, you build the depth behind the guys like Zimmer and Frazier, and then maybe if you want to put Greg Allen and Santander and maybe even Lucas now in another tier, And now you start seeing a Connor Maribel develop and a Kai Tom, who was a high round draft pick last year. And in Mahoning Valley this year, you got Mitch Longo, 14th round pick. You have options. You have a Salento Sales, a John Carter, who are still both relatively young. So they're starting to build the depth there, and you saw them address it again right away in the first round this year with Will Benson.
Yeah, that's my biggest point of argument with people who just are constantly clamoring for the Indians to spend more money because they think that's the only way the team will be successful. Look at what this team has done the last 5 years in the draft, and look at the farm system now. This farm system had, and I know we've mentioned this before, this farm system had nothing, literally nothing worth talking about literally before Francisco Lindor was drafted. There was nothing worth considering as a long-term major league solution for the big league club. And then all of a sudden, they draft Francisco Lindor, and that kind of kicks off the whole process. And even before that, with the drafting guys like Kipnis and even Chisenhall to a certain extent, they start to build up that farm system, and now they have that kind of that depth and that kind of currency in trades, if you want to go that direction. So if you want the Indians to spend more, just look at what they've done with the farm system. Look at what the Kansas City Royals have done and how far building up a farm system has taken them, and teams like the Cardinals who just thrive on that philosophy. The Indians have really come a long way in developing their minor league system and their prospects, and it has really started to pay dividends with guys like Lindor and Naquin and guys who are still in the system now who we probably will see in the major leagues either this year or in the next few years to come. So, yeah, definitely great to see this kind of depth starting to form and develop. So we want to move over to your neck of the woods, though, since Mahoning Valley season has started up. We were in Mahoning Valley last week for a live remote podcast. We talked to Juan Hillman and Tristan McKenzie. We talked to Edwin Rodriguez, Mitch Longo, and now that the season has started, we can start to measure their performances. Let's start with Hillman and McKenzie, though, since those are the two guys I think that everybody wants to hear about on that roster. They have both made their Scrappers debuts, both pitched solidly. McKenzie more so than Hillman. McKenzie pitched 6 innings of 4-hit ball, allowed only 1 unearned run, walked 1, struck out 6. Hillman allowed 3 runs on 5 hits in 6 innings. He did hit a batter, as did McKenzie. Did not walk anybody, struck out 5. So, since you're there watching these guys, first of all, did you see either of their starts down there, or were they both on the road?
McKenzie's start was the second game of the season against West Virginia. Micah Minyard actually started the season opener, and he turned in a pretty good performance. He's thrown a couple of good games, 2.53 ERA and 2 starts for Minyard. But McKenzie, his outing, and again, he took the loss in that game, and it really didn't do any justice because, again, he only allowed that 1 unearned run. He lit it up, Jake. I from what I saw, and I paid close attention, and it's unfortunate because Eastwood Field at Mahoning Valley doesn't have a radar gun that you can see, an immediate reaction to the pitch. But if I had to take a stab, he had to be hitting 97 to 98. I mean, he was throwing fire, and we know he can do that. But the location he had on his fastball, and especially inside to righties, I think it was huge, and that's hard for a right-hander to do. McKenzie's a tall dude, so he has that kind of delivery that it doesn't overpower you, but it throws you at a more downward angle, and it allows you to get that velocity that he thrives on. And, some pitchers can pitch, but the fastball just isn't effective enough to get inside to where batters literally can't catch up to it. McKenzie's fastball is fast enough, and he locates it well enough to get swing and miss outs and to get, a ground ball out if you could throw it low. And just the outing he put together, and the numbers will show it, and 6 innings, that's something to be concerned about because Mahoning Valley, I think low A, and especially this short season with a lot of rookies and a lot of people getting their first taste of professional experience, you're not going to see pitchers go out and throw 7 or 8 innings and then hand it over to quote unquote the closer to finish it off. You're going to see 6 innings maximum at the Mahoning Valley in the short season level. So a 6-inning outing for him is great as a first start. He's going again tonight again. The Thursday we're recording, he's going again tonight on the road in Auburn, or in Williamsport. And then the team travels home to play Saturday. So, I'm going to get to see Juan Hillman, I do believe, on either Saturday or Sunday. So we'll talk more about Hillman next week and what I see from him. But what I saw from McKenzie was very encouraging in that, again, he located the fastball. The breaking ball, he doesn't have a great, diving curveball, but he has that hard slider because he does throw harder. And he did a pretty good job of locating that too. But that's what really stuck out to me was the fastball inside of righties. And he didn't really pitch many. I don't think West Virginia they might have one lefty in that lineup, and he really didn't do much. So overall, for McKenzie, a great outing, 6 innings is what you want to see in that debut. Hillman had 6 innings as well, just allowed a couple more hits. All the runs he allowed were earned, so you live and learn. But he still allowed less than one batter on base per inning, a .83 whip. So encouraging stuff from the 2 kids who we need this from them. We talk about the depth the Indians have right now at the major league level, and guys like a Plutko or a Mondo and guys that are coming up. We need these 2 guys as high round draft picks to develop, and we need these 2 guys. We don't need to see them in Akron this season, but we need these 2 guys to show signs of progression, and both of them off to great starts so far.
Yeah, that's great to hear about Tristan McKenzie being able to throw hard with command. Take what you can from one outing, but yeah, anytime I hear about a young guy who throws hard and has good command, that's definitely a nice first step in the right direction for his professional career. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what your scouting report on Juan Hillman is. So yeah, we talking more about that, but I want to move more to the hitting side of the Scrappers roster. And most of the guys, it's only a few games, so most of the guys are still batting around 200 or below the Mendoza line. But a couple of the guys who are off to great starts, Emmanuel Tapia, first baseman there, and then a guy who we're more familiar with from last year's draft, Luke Wakamatsu. He's off to a great start, batting .350 in 5 games. Tapia has 2 home runs and 4 RBIs already, and that matches his total home run total from last year already. So he's off to a nice start, swinging the bat from a power standpoint. And then Wakamatsu has 3 doubles and 3 RBIs. So I'll throw it over to you. What do you think of Wakamatsu and Tapia in the Scrappers offense overall?
Well, starting with Tapia, I'm happy for him, and it's kind of hard to be happy because Tapia, getting to know him last year, he spent time at Mahoning Valley last year. He's a great kid. He's very nice. And Travis Fryman, when he managed the team last year, spoke highly of him, spoke very highly of Tapia and the way he went about his business, his work ethic, his demeanor in the clubhouse, and the way he carries himself. He went down in August with, I believe it was an ankle injury. He was sliding, and it just got caught awkwardly. And Travis Fryman, he told us, this was the day after the season ended, he told us how just like broken he was by seeing Tapia go down like that. And to see him this season already, 5 games, they've only played, they're only playing their 3rd series of the season, of course, short season. But Tapia in those 5 games, 6 hits in those 20 at-bats, that's a very nice start at .300 average. And this is a guy who is supposed to provide a pop in the bat with power. He has home run power, and 2 dingers in 5 games. That's a great start, and it's great attribution to that. So if he can, and I like to call him, I was talking to some of the guys in the press box on last Saturday. It was when Mahoning Valley had their 2nd game. versus West Virginia. Emmanuel Tapia, and you can relate to this a little bit, is kind of like a light version of Nelly Rodriguez in that he's got the power ability, but the first base defense, he's not a doorstop by any means, but you gotta hope to see quickness a little bit. He's not quick over at first, and they call it, I call it the other hot corner because you see some stuff happen over there first occasionally. And I don't think he's developed the quickness and the footwork yet to play a defensive first base, but he's got the bat, and the bat's going to come along with him. But again, what he's done so far this season has helped the Scrappers, and it's definitely, he's their everyday cleanup hitter, and it's definitely encouraging from a guy who's spoken highly of by a guy, especially like Travis Fryman, who holds pretty high regards in the Indian system, I would like to think. And who knows? Is this another Nelly Rodriguez? Is this another Bobby Bradley in the making? Is this another, dare I say, Jesus Aguilar? So I like the thought of having, and we always talk about depth again, that of having this guy sitting back, and he's still very young, having this guy sit back and learn and develop, and then you have guys like a Bobby Bradley and a Nelly ahead of him who can kind of coast in their own development too. So I like having Tapia in the depth perspective, but just so far what he's done this season, you can't ask for anything more coming back from that injury.
Yeah, and I'm looking at his numbers now, and I notice he already has 9 strikeouts. So yeah, definitely fitting that mold of the Nelly and Bobby Bradley type first base slugger who can hit for power, but will also swing and miss a lot. So he's already starting to see that develop from him. But if he hits for power, that's how he's going to increase his value. I mentioned before Luke Wakamatsu batting .350 in 5 games so far. He has the 3 doubles and 3 RBIs. What do you think of him and how he's been playing?
Well, when the Indians drafted Luke, it was essentially a flyer in that he may or may not sign. He was a 20th round pick. If he essentially didn't verbally commit to Rice before draft, he would have been easily a top 10 round pick. He would have been in the top 10 rounds, I think. Fell to the 20th round. He's only 19 years old as of right now. 6'3". He's a tall shortstop. He goes and gets it. And, he may not be as agile, and I'm not going to comp anyone to Francisco Lindor. He's not as agile as a Lindor type shortstop would be. He's got great glove work, and that's why the system likes him. Look, I mean, last year in the Arizona League, 27 games, 267 average, a homer, 12 RBIs. So he drives the ball. He gets the ball out there. And, he's off to a great start in Mahoning Valley. And this is what I think with Wakamatsu is if you can get him to kind of – it's going to sound weird because he's the son of Don Wakamatsu, who used to manage the Mariners, and now he's the Royals bench coach. If you can remove the label of being Don's son, and not that he's, blinded by it, but for him to become his own player, I think he as a player can translate into a productive shortstop. Now, whether it's a utility man, whether it's, a guy who we see as a prospect, because we know Lindor is going to be in Cleveland for a while. And this is what worries me, is when you have a star player like a Lindor or a Michael Brantley or Kipnis, whoever it may be, developing behind them and kind of moving guys around. If Wakamatsu spends a whole season in Mahoning Valley and then next season comes back to Mahoning Valley, I would hope he's in Lake County by then. But if he comes back to Mahoning Valley next year, I want to see how he handles it, because the system needs guys behind Lindor, of course, but that's got to be tough developing when you're in short season low A and the guy you're chasing is only 2.5 years older than you, and he's regarded as one of the best at his position in the game. That's got to be tough. So for him to remove the label of Don's son, for him to remove the idea of, wow, I got to develop behind this, in my head. Now he can move to third base, and he's a shortstop by trade. He said he could play third, And surely I assume he can play second as well. And that's what you need from guys that are developing behind star players. You need these guys to be flexible. You know, a few weeks ago, Jake, you and I talked about the Eric Gonzalez's and guys like that in Columbus and in Akron that are developing, and they're sitting behind Lindor, and they're sitting behind maybe Urshela or Yandy Diaz. And it's got to be tough. But to have Luke Wakamatsu this deep in the system, I think it's all good for the system. It's just a matter of, can he develop as a player? Can he overcome that idea of, wow, again, I'm chasing this guy who's not too much older than me, and he's already one of the best.
That's interesting. I like that you brought up the father-son thing, and obviously I don't think he holds any ill will towards his father, but you know, there is probably going to be some of that where he's coming up and he's Don Wakamatsu's son, like you said, and you wonder if that is going to impede his progress at all. I don't think it will, because I think that mostly because he's not really, Don Wakamatsu is not really linked to the Indians very much in any way. So that, I think, if he was like coming up with the Mariners or the Royals or whoever, that would probably be more of a factor. But I don't think it's going to be as much of a factor with the Indians, and that may have played into why he chose to sign here, just so he could kind of develop his own identity as a player. So for him getting off to this nice start, he's off and running on that goal. And you know, you said he can maybe play third base. I mean, you said he's a tall guy and maybe not as agile as a smaller Francisco Lindor or Jose Ramirez type. Maybe we see him move to third. Maybe we see him become a utility player. Who knows? But that'll be something to keep an eye on. I'll be back over in Mahoning Valley actually next week, so I'm looking forward to seeing some of these guys actually play instead of just looking at the numbers. But the last guy I want to talk about Mahoning Valley is a guy who just arrived there recently, draft pick Logan Ice, catcher. He's a guy who was a high round pick for the Indians this year, very highly spoken of and highly regarded. And he's not batting so well to start his career. I mean, he's only played in 3 games, but he's already drawn 4 walks in only 3 games. So 4 walks against 2 strikeouts. He has a hit. It is a double. He has 2 RBIs. Corey, have you had a chance to see Logan Ice yet since he arrived?
No, Ice actually he joined the roster in Game 3 of the season. The Scrappers opened up a 2-game set with West Virginia to start the season. Then they went on the road for a 6-game road trip. They haven't been home since they had those 2 games. So I haven't seen Ice yet. I think he signed on Scrappers opening day and then was added to the roster on Game 2 and didn't play. So he started that 3rd game. But again, what we talked about a couple weeks ago with Jeff, with our buddy Jeff Ellis, what Ice can do for the system, as highly as he was drafted and what he's worth to now the system and what he was worth as a player coming out into the draft, I think he is going to be Mahoning Valley's starting catcher throughout the season. I think he's going to be a guy who can see time in Lake County. He might be a guy who next season could start in Lynchburg. I think and that's not knocking Francisco Mejia down in Lake County, who was an all-star for him, but I think Ice is that good. And when the Scrappers come back home, that's going to be the Saturday. So again, 2 days from right now when we're recording, I'm going to write my notebook. I believe Sunday or Saturday it will be posted, and it's going to have, here's what they did. It's early still. These guys have played 6 games. It's still a young season, and Ice already, from the second he's got there, he's been their starting catcher. He's been their guy, and right behind him you got a Juan Gomes, who is Yan Gomes' brother. He's played 2 games. You got Gian Paul Gomez, who's played a couple of games. Actually, he has 3 hits and 7 at bats on this season, off to a nice little start. But as soon as Logan Ice basically got settled in, he was thrown right into the mix by Edwin Rodriguez. So, I want to see Ice get playing time this year. It's always tough to get playing time at this level, but we know what he can do with the scouting reports. We've seen the film. We talked about it. And now it's just time for him to get out there and perform. And I have confidence that he can do it.
Yeah, so we're getting toward the end of our time here. So I wanted to wrap things up, talk about some things that's going on at the upper levels of the farm system. First of all, Bradley Zimmer. He has struggled for most of the season, having trouble with strikeouts, swinging and missing a lot. It's been an ongoing adjustment process for him throughout the whole year. But recently, it seems like that those adjustments are finally starting to take hold. Looking at his last 10 games, entering tonight on Thursday, he has 10 walks in 33 at bats, 4 strikeouts. He has 7 stolen bases, batting .333, got a home run, 2 RBIs. Zimmer, I talked to him a little bit when he had a game where he got on base 5 times, and we talked to him afterwards. And there was a little bit of a run there where he was on base, I think, like 7 straight plate appearances he got on base over the span of 2 games. So for him to start drawing walks and not strike out so much, it's definitely an encouraging sign, especially since I think that the Indians had, and a lot of the fans, I'm sure, had probably envisioned him being in Columbus by now after going to Akron late last year. And his struggles have kind of kept him at the AA level, and also kept guys like Greg Allen down in Lynchburg, just because. But to see him start to come around now at the plate, see him start to develop more of a patient approach, draw a few more walks. I mean, the numbers still aren't great overall, but I mean, he has over 80 strikeouts this year, but the walk numbers are starting to creep up a little bit more. When you look at the numbers of what Zimmer's done the last 10 or so games, Corey, what do you see, and do you think that this is an encouraging sign for him moving forward?
I like to see patience at the plate. I think it's a great sign of development. Yeah, it's a little, I don't know if it's alarming, but I think it's a little, it's time for him to get there in regards to him being from Akron to Columbus by now. I think it just kind of shows how the difference in competition and the difference in play style and the difference in just overall what you see from A ball to AA is just huge. And consider AA a weed out, if you will. Consider it what you may. I don't want to say he struggled in Akron, but he's had to do a little soul searching. And perhaps the first time in his career, he's had to do that for the first time. So maybe it's been an adjustment thing for Bradley. Maybe it's been just a matter of finding himself or just adjusting to the pitching. And we know what he can do. Enough has been said about Bradley Zimmer's talent, but just the adjustments he's made this season, it's something that's not working maybe. And it's not to knock anything he's done this season. Again, he's a fantastic player. We know what he can do, but it's alarming to see this strikeout number. It's alarming to see the low on base percentage for what we know he's worth. So I don't know if it's an adjustment. I don't know what it is, but maybe we just need to let this happen, and maybe we need to stop comparing. And I know it's easy to, because they're so related in that we know they're friends. We know they're really good friends. We know they have similar development paths, with the exception of how they were drafted and when they were drafted. But I think we need to stop comparing Clint Frazier to Bradley Zimmer and realize that these guys are different players, and these guys are going to develop differently. And it's great that Clint Frazier is performing well. And it's great that, maybe he surpassed Zimmer per se. But we know Zimmer has the talent. We know what he can do. It's just a matter of him putting it together. Adjustments he's made in Akron that haven't panned out yet. So it's just going to be a wait and see with Bradley Zimmer, I think.
Yeah, right now that's pretty much where they are, but to see him start to make adjustments, because I'll tell you firsthand, there was a period there just watching him on the field. He didn't look like he was comfortable at all on the field, and whether it was at the plate, even defensively, it was starting to affect his game, his struggles. But now it seems like he's starting to come around. He's starting to make those adjustments. And like you said, Double A is is the major adjustment level. And not only is it that, but this is the first time that Zimmer has repeated performance at a league or a level, because he has moved up level to level from year to year since he's been drafted. So this is the first time that a league and teams and pitchers and whoever have had a chance to adjust to his game, and now that they have, he's had to make counter adjustments pretty much for the first time in his career, because for the most part, I would probably say his talent has pretty much carried him to this point, and now he's having to make adjustments. And I don't know if that was a problem for him or a struggle for him or what it was, but it seems like it was a long process, but now it's finally starting to come around. You're starting to reap the benefits of it. I mean, and then even though he's not batting, he's only batting 238 on the year heading into tonight's game, but he has a 371 on base percentage. He has an 842 OPS. He has 27 steals. So he's aggressive on the base pass. So he's doing a lot of things well this season, despite having the struggles, the strikeouts, and what have you. But now to see that performance at the plate and those adjustments at the plate finally start to come to fruition, I think that the rest of the season should be very interesting to see how Zimmer develops, and if he gets to the point where they can move him up to Columbus and then move a guy like Greg Allen up to Akron. So very encouraging to see what he's been able to do the last few games. Kind of wrap things up here today, though. I want to talk about Adam Plutko getting promoted to AAA, and it was all because Cody Anderson had that elbow inflammation. He had to be sent to the DL. So spot opened up in Columbus, and Plutko, after going 3-3 with a 3.27 ERA and 13 starts in Akron, got the call to move up, and so far he's been doing pretty well. He's actually pitching tonight on Thursday, but heading into tonight, he did one start. He pitched 5 2/3, allowed only 2 runs on 3 hits, struck out 4. He did walk 5, but maybe that was just a little bit of the AAA jitters getting to him. But Plutko, Corey, I'll put it to you this way: Plutko getting promoted to Columbus, it might be just for as long as Cody's on the DL, but if he pitches well enough, it could be a permanent move. And if it is a permanent move, are we going to see a guy like Julian Merriweather, who is healthy? He had some injury issues earlier in the year. He's back. He's healthy. He actually pitched in the Carolina League All-Star game this week. Started the game for the Carolina League All-Stars. Pitched an inning. Struck out 1. Didn't allow a run or a hit. So now that the All-Star game has passed, and I think that's what the Indians were waiting for, and Adam Plutko is in Columbus, are we going to see Julian Merriweather in Akron anytime soon? And is Plutko going to be staying in Columbus?
Well, to answer the Merriweather question, who knows? Because you and I at least have been talking about it for quite a while now, it seems like. With Plutko, I think it's a Columbus stay for the rest of the season. And knock on wood, barring any setbacks with the big league club, he could be one of the guys that get considered for the call-up. And that's exciting, especially for a guy like you who's seen him and who's gotten to know him and knows what he can do. To see him to come to fruition in some regard, it's encouraging. And it's encouraging to have, again, the depth, to have a guy who is kind of surging. We talk about Cody Anderson beginning of the season. Where's he really been and what has he really done this season? Let's be honest. So to have a guy like Plutko step up, and now he's literally stepping up to AAA, that's a great sign. Again, he could put himself in that conversation for a call-up if something were to happen, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I know that Ryan Merritt has struggled lately. I don't know off the top of my head how Will Roberts is doing, but Cody on the DL, that's a big depth option that is lost to the Indians. So yeah, maybe Plutko, if not for his talent, maybe just out of necessity, puts him in the position to be a major league call-up option behind like Clevenger and Will Roberts, or maybe even ahead of Roberts, just because Plutko has more upside. Maybe that we see him at some point this year. Of course, we hope not, because that means that something catastrophic has happened in the rotation, and the Indians' rotation is pretty well set right now. So I'm excited to see Plutko move up. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. He's one of the best guys I've ever had a chance to get to know and interview in Akron. His stuff, his talent speaks for itself. I hope it's permanent, because he deserves it, and he's got the kind of stuff to stick at that level and continue his development as he progresses toward his eventual major league debut.
Absolutely. I think it's just a matter of, I don't want to say a matter of time, but I think the process is getting closer. And that's always great to see with the prospect like this. One final note before we sign off again. I mentioned I'm going to be writing a notebook for Mahoning Valley. Should be up over the weekend. We'll get it submitted, but it'll break down basically the start, guys like Wakamatsu and Tapia and Hillman and McKenzie that we talked about today, in addition to some other players and some news. So look for that over the weekend on IBI.
Sounds good. Also, be sure, since we're plugging, be sure to check me out. I was on the Scout Around the League podcast this morning, Thursday morning. Was on with Kevin McCarthy, who is the Scout Cubs beat guy. We were talking about the Indians. Did a nice little chunk about the Indians and their being in first place. Talked about the pitching staff. Talked about what deadline moves they could be making, and how the AL Central race will be shaping up. So be sure to check that out. It's on the site right now. I posted on my Twitter. Speaking of which, be sure to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Jake D Baseball. Corey's at CD Christen. Live remotes, we'll be sure to do one or two more before the season ends. I think Lake County will probably be our next stop. We'll be talking to the folks up there and about getting up there and talking to some of the players and coaches up there. It's going to be exciting. About halfway point through the season at the Major League and the minor league side. Corey, your season down in Mahoning Valley is just getting started. Some exciting stuff going on throughout the farm system.
Oh, and you know what? Now that Mahoning Valley and now the Arizona League are in full swing, it gets a little more progressive, I think, with players moving, with, some players pushing their development or falling back to some degree. It's an exciting time. And, I'm excited because Mahoning Valley is back. I get to go to games. I get to be around the team. Nothing better than being at the ballpark on a nice day. And to see guys, again, we talked about Wakamatsu, talked about Tapia, we talked about Hillman and McKenzie. It's great, and I'm thrilled, and I'm sure ready to get going.
All right, so like I said, be sure to follow us on Twitter for all the updates on live remotes and future shows and whatever content we'll be pumping out on IBI. Was the best place to get in touch with us and keep up with what we're doing. So that's going to do it for us tonight. For Corey Christen and the Farm Report Podcast, I'm Jake Dungan, and we say to you, have a good one.